Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ellen. Just some preliminary help notes. It's a good habit to keep yourself muted unless you're about to ask a question during the Q&A session later. Um, Also, it's helpful to turn off our videos, especially if we plan to be moving around, and that will reduce distractions for the speaker and everybody else. We will have a Q&A after Bryn's presentation, and for our Zoom audience, you've got several ways to ask a question. You can have your video on, and if we can see your name, then you can just raise your hand the old-fashioned way and keep waving it around. There's also a raise hand feature in Zoom, and you can find that by clicking on the tab called Reactions. And finally, you can also ask your question in the chat feature, and Ellen will keep track of questions that come via that way. That's the way most people actually ask questions, and we'll pose those questions later. Before we get started, let me just begin by acknowledging the land and the people of the land. Toronto Field Naturalists wishes to acknowledge this land through which we walk. For thousands of years, the land has been shared by the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe. Toronto is situated on the land within the Toronto Purchase, Treaty 13, the traditional and treaty lands of the Mississaugas and the Credit First Nation. This territory is also part of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, which is a covenant agreement between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat peoples, and allied nations who peacefully share the land and all its resources. Today, this land is home to people of numerous nations, as we all know. It's very multicultural, and we all are grateful to have the opportunities to continue to care for and share the beauty of this land. I want to thank very much the whole lecture team for organizing our lecture series this fall and coming winter, especially thanks to Michelle, Ellen, Peter, and Robert. And before we start, let me welcome all of you who have joined us today. This event has been shared on several social media channels aside from our website. And please share in the chat how you heard about us. We hope you'll come again, and we hope you'll join us as members of TFN. I'll introduce Bryn Coe, our speaker, in just a few moments, but let me just give you a brief intro to the topic. The Portlands Flood Protection Project, being undertaken by Waterfront Toronto, reconnected the Don River with Lake Ontario last year by creating a naturalized river mouth. With an overall budget of $1.38 billion, it's one of the largest public infrastructure projects ever undertaken in Toronto. This past July, the celebration was held on Toronto's newest island, Ukumin-Minising, which means, by the way, place of black cherry trees, which was formed by a newly created river valley that incorporates flood protection features of the project that blend into the natural landscape. The celebration, attended by many politicians and dignitaries, recognized the newly transformed Lower Don River and 50 acres of new parkland in Toronto. At full build-out, it's estimated that Ukumin-Minising will be home to more than 15,000 residents, nearly 3,000 jobs, and another 10 acres of parkland to be open next year. For years, the Toronto Region and Conservation Authority, which we finally know as TRCA, has been monitoring the aquatic community within the Lower Don River, gathering valuable data on the health of local fish populations. As the Don Mouth Naturalization Project nears completion, these ongoing monitoring efforts are absolutely critical in understanding the project's impact on the area. This presentation by Bryn will provide an overview of the project, focusing on TRCA's long-term monitoring of the fish community and sharing preliminary results, very encouraging results, by the way, that highlight the early changes within the ecosystem. Now, I'm really delighted to introduce Bryn Coe. She is Supervisor of Special Projects, Aquatic Monitoring and Management at the TRCA. And Bryn joined TRCA's Aquatic Monitoring Management team in 2017 after earning a degree in geography from Wilfrid Laurier University. From 2017 to 2021, She was deeply involved in TRCA's aquatic field monitoring, collecting essential biological data for the Toronto Mouth Naturalization Project, as well as many other projects along the waterfront. Today, Bryn leads TRCA's aquatic monitoring efforts and numerous other waterfront-related initiatives. Her work focuses on ensuring, through environmental monitoring, data analysis, and supporting restoration efforts, to improve the aquatic ecosystems on our waterfront and our waterways. Bryn, I'm absolutely delighted to have you be our speaker today, and I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Philip. It's nice to be here. I'll just share my screen and you can let me know that it's properly shared.
Looks great.
Looks good? Perfect.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Oh yeah, thanks everyone. And yeah, again, thanks Philip for the introduction. Like Philip mentioned, I'm here to talk about the Don Mouth Naturalization Project from the lens of the aquatic monitoring team at TRCA. So I'm just going to go a little bit briefly over the project background, the design development, some current conditions, the aquatic monitoring that we've been doing in the area, and then the project's impacts on the Toronto waterfront as a whole. And so just to give a bit of context, I'm sure many of you already know a lot of this information, but the project is located at the mouth of the Don River where it enters the Keating Channel before flowing into Toronto's Inner Harbour. The Don River watershed is about 36,000 hectares in size and spans 4 cities. It flows roughly 38 kilometers from its headwaters on the Oak Ridges Moraine all the way down to Lake Ontario. The watershed is divided into 7 sub-watersheds and is one of the most urbanized watersheds in Canada. About 85% of the land used is urban, with only around 14% remaining as natural cover, most of which is within the ravine system. And so this map shows the Don River in 1793. At that time, the Don had a meandering channel, much like other rivers in the area, draining into Lake Ontario. The key difference here was sediment. The Don carried very heavy sediment loads downstream, which met with even more sediment moving along the shoreline that had eroded from the Scarborough Bluffs. When these two sources came together, they formed a long spit and barrier beach system. This in turn created a vast coastal wetland known as Ashbridges Bay Marsh. And as settlement and population growth increased in the 1800s, large-scale lake filling began. By the late 19th century, basically everything south of Queen Street had been filled in, and the marsh was lost to the development of the portlands. Around the mid-1880s, the original spit was also cut off from the Eastern Gap, creating what we now know as the Toronto Islands. And so during the development of the Portlands, the Keating Channel was established to divert the mouth of the Don River, which created a 90-degree bend in the river mouth, resulting in very poor habitat conditions. Much of the shoreline was lined with vertical concrete dock walls, which don't provide any riparian habitat, shade, or shelter for fish. The channel itself was highly engineered and uniform, which meant there wasn't much structural diversity or complexity for aquatic communities. There was also very little submergent vegetation, which is critical for fish spawning, cover, and food resources. And then the water conditions were also a pretty big challenge. The system was highly turbid, and just overall water quality was quite impaired. And so all the infill and land creation left behind a very low lying area. In the 1970s, TRCA's hydraulic modeling showed much of this land was at risk of flooding. The constructed river valley couldn't move enough water during a major storm, so floodwaters would spill over the banks. And this map just shows what would happen in a regulatory storm using Hurricane Hazel as a benchmark. On top of that, sediment that once built Ashbridges Bay Marsh now settles in the Keating Channel. It has required annual dredging since 1912, and without it, the channel would just fill in with sediment and floodwaters would then spread across the landscape in attempts to make it towards the lake. And so just a little bit about the design development. It's important to note that this innovative design process didn't just happen. It was shaped by decades of community advocacy. The task force to bring back the Don and other NGOs called for a cleaner, greener Don River. And the 1991 report, Bringing Back the Don, set out a vision for the naturalization. And that citizen energy really helped push the idea of restoring the mouth of the river onto the city and the provincial agenda. And so, in terms of actual solutions, two coordinated environmental assessments were undertaken and completed in 2015. The first was the Don Mouth Naturalization and Flood Protection Project, led by TRCA in partnership with Waterfront Toronto and the City of Toronto. The study asked, how can we provide flood protection for the Don River while also naturalizing it? If the focus had only been on flood protection, the project would have looked completely different. Instead, the design emphasized creating opportunities for habitat restoration and naturalization while still allowing existing land use to continue and supporting the future development of sustainable communities. The second study was the Lower Don Lands Masterclass EA, led by Waterfront Toronto with the city. This one followed the Don Mouth EA and asked, how do we build the necessary municipal infrastructure once we know where the new river will be? And so what made this process unique is that the river design came first and then the development planning followed. Normally it is the other way around, development first and then trying to kind of fit in nature afterwards. So it was a pretty unique approach. And so, how was the design ultimately chosen? Basically, the environmental assessment process evaluated a wide range of options with three main objectives in mind: providing flood protection, creating natural habitat, and integrating the project with the city. And so, the preferred solution kept the Keating Channel in place because it's wide, it's deep, and it can move very large volumes of water during major flood events. And then the new river valley system was created by cutting down into existing soil to lower the riverbed elevation while also raising land on either side. Um, the design incorporated naturalized habitat features that not only help manage floodwaters, but also create green spaces for recreation. And when it came to shaping the look and feel of the new river, the team drew inspiration from local examples. They studied the Rouge Marsh in Scarborough, Duffins Creek in Ajax, and even old maps of the Don River before it flowed into Ashbridges Bay Marsh. And those systems had meandering channels close to the lake with backwater lagoons, wetlands, and a mix of submergent and emergent vegetation. And so by mimicking those natural patterns and functions, the project was able to create a more dynamic river mouth that supports both flood protection and healthy aquatic habitats. So the revitalization of the Portlands had the goal of restoring a range of habitats to support diverse and resilient fish communities, while also addressing modern challenges such as non-native and invasive species. The design included a mix of aquatic features, submergent and emergent marshes, open water, wetland areas, each contributing to the overall ecological health of the system. And by creating this variety of habitats, the project improves conditions for native species by providing opportunities for shelter, spawning, and foraging, while again also helping limit the influence of non-native species that we have along the Toronto waterfront. And many of the techniques used to create this new habitat actually came from the Toronto Waterfront Aquatic Habitat Restoration Strategy, which is a mouthful. It's also known as TWARS, which is a little bit easier to say. And so TWARS was developed by TRCA in 2003 as a guiding document for restoring aquatic habitats along the waterfront. It outlines a wide range of recommended techniques to improve habitat diversity and function. And so, using this framework, the project incorporated features such as anchored log tangles to provide cover, shallow rocky shoals to create feeding and nursery areas, and gravel beds to support fish spawning, for example. All of these elements were designed to work together within the new river valley and wetlands to support a healthier and more resilient fish community. And so this photo was actually taken before the new river valley and wetlands were flooded, showing the habitat features that are now underwater. The design team built these elements in the landscape in advance, knowing they'd provide structure and diversity once the river was flowing. And so you can see examples like submerged log tangles, rocky shoals, deeper pools, and basking habitat. All of these were intentionally placed to create an environment that again supports fish, turtles, and other wildlife. A lot of which now, again, underwater that you can't really see when you're visiting the park. So it's cool that to have some of these photos beforehand. And while much of the project is about creating habitat for fish and wildlife, it is also about connecting people to the water. And so the design provides safe and accessible opportunities to experience the new river and wetlands. This includes designated spaces for urban fishing, bird watching, or simply relaxing by the water. And by creating these access points to water, like you can see in this photo, a node that was created, we can encourage the public to use these areas rather than potentially trampling sensitive shoreline habitats. The design also includes spots for canoe and kayak launches, making it easier for people to explore the new river. And at the same time, to protect the habitat, federal regulations do prohibit the operation of motorized vessels in the new river mouth, sorry, with the exception of our monitoring crews and the marine police. Together, these elements balance ecological restoration with recreation, ensuring the community can engage with the space while still respecting the natural environment. And so this overhead image was taken this past spring, and it shows the transformed landscape. You can see the naturalized river channel winding through the site, the surrounding wetlands, and to the north, the Keating Channel, which still remains in place. Beyond reshaping the river itself, the project created a huge range of new habitats. More than 2 million herbaceous plants, along with 77,000 shrubs and 5,000 trees, were planted to establish a native landscape. And to give these plants the best chance to thrive, 3 consecutive summers of invasive species control were carried out. Several lake-connected wetlands were also established, which act as a natural refuge. During flood events, we can already see the difference. The river runs kind of more brown with sediment, while the wetlands remain clear, providing important refuge from urban flows in the watershed. Carp exclusion gates and perched cattail marshes were also built to diversify the shoreline and protect sensitive wetland areas. And then just a reminder, this is what was here before. And so Waterfront Toronto has been doing an amazing job at documenting the progress of the project. So I wanted to share a few photos just showing the current conditions. This photo is looking south at the river valley. The bridge here is the Commissioner Street Bridge running east to west. And you can already see how lush the riverbanks are. There's already been really, really great growth for these areas. And this is the river valley facing east. So this is the Cherry Street South Bridge. You can see wetland 1 on the left and then wetland 2 on the right. And then still facing east, just a little bit closer view of wetland 2. You can see the carp exclusion gate structure at the entrance of the wetland on the bottom left of the photo and the pedestrian bridge to cross over the river. And this is the Don spillway. So under normal flow conditions, isn't actually part of the Don River watershed. Its primary input comes from the shipping channel to the south, but during extreme flood events, the berm along the naturalized river will overtop and water will spill into this wetland. Basically, it acts as a relief valve, safely holding and slowing down floodwaters as it moves toward the lake. And when it is not being used for flood protection, it's just more habitat provided for fish and wildlife. And then this one is just wetland 4. You can see the red bridge. That's the Commissioner Street Bridge again, but this is the top left photo is facing north and the bottom photo is facing southeast. And so to understand the success of the new habitats that were built, TRC has been actively monitoring the area to see how fish are responding. TRCA has been monitoring aquatic communities along the Toronto waterfront since 1989. These long-term surveys track changes in fish populations and help us understand the overall health of the ecosystem. Across TRCA's jurisdiction, we monitor 72 kilometers of shoreline as well as 9 watersheds, giving us a comprehensive view of how fish communities are responding to environmental changes and restoration efforts. In the Lower Don specifically, fisheries monitoring has been ongoing since 2003. To collect this data, we use a combination of methods depending on the habitat. In deeper areas on the lake or in river mouths, boat electrofishing is often used, while shallower, wadable streams are sampled using backpack electrofishing. Electrofishing temporarily stunts fish within a small radius of our equipment and allows us to safely net them. We then identify the species of fish, we weigh them, we measure them, and then we release them back into the water close to where they were captured. This long-term data provides the foundation for assessing the impacts of the projects like the Don Mouth Naturalization Project and also helps guide future restoration work. And so before construction began, TRCA's aquatic monitoring team carried out boat electrofishing surveys throughout the study area. Over a 10-year period, we collected 281 samples at the locations shown on this map. Roughly 10% of the samples didn't actually catch any fish, while the remainder were dominated by cool water species we commonly find across the Toronto waterfront, including emerald shiner, gizzard shad, and alewife. This long-term data set gives us a strong reference point, helping us track how fish communities respond to the restoration once new habitats were built. And so, although this area is not yet open to the public, the first portion of the Don Mouth Naturalization Project to completed was the Cherry Street Lake Filling Project. Construction began in December 2017 and was finished in November 2019. This area, shown in purple on the map in the top left, represents just a very small portion of the overall project. However, since the habitat has been built since 2019, we've already completed our post-performance monitoring associated for this specific area, which has helped us understand how fish communities are responding to the new habitat. And for in reference, this is what the area looked like in 2017. The landmass at the top was Esrock Key, and since the project involved carving out a new river and creating an island, the area around Esrock Key had to be filled in to stabilize that island. And then to balance the impacts of the infill, aquatic habitat was built in as part of the subproject. And so here's an image of what's there now, and there's a couple of notable features with regard to fish habitat. The first being the North Cove. It's an open shoal berm that is open to the Keating Channel. The West Cove is an enclosed area with two carp exclusion gates, and then the shoreline connecting those two coves. This area has rocky shoals extending about 5 to 10 meters into the water. For both coves, there was a lot of rock and anchored wood added to the system to provide fish habitat. The West Cove was planted with native aquatic vegetation, but the North Cove was not. And I just wanted to show a photo of a carp exclusion gate. This isn't actually from the West Cove. It's from one of the other wetlands I'm going to talk about, but I just wanted to give you an idea again what they look like. Carp gates are commonly put in wetlands to keep common carp out. Common carp are a large non-native species that migrate into wetlands in the spring to spawn, preferring warm, shallow water, and they stir up large amounts of sediment, making the water very turbid. This prevents sunlight from reaching aquatic plants, limiting vegetation growth, and reducing habitat quality for native fish. Carp gates help protect wetlands by keeping carp out while still allowing native species to pass through. And so after the West Cove was constructed and enclosed with those two the carp barriers, we monitored fish use in the area using minnow traps and Windermere traps. Based on all the habitat that was built and the vegetation that was being established, we opted to use these methods rather than our electrofishing boat. Within the first few years, our surveys identified 11 different fish species utilizing the newly created habitat. This included bluegill, brook stickleback, brown bullhead, largemouth bass, northern pike, pumpkin seed, rock bass, round goby, spot-tail shiner, white sucker, and yellow perch. Notably, none of the three most common species observed pre-construction were found in the cove post-construction, but it's actually not that surprising as the cove supports a warmer water community compared to the cooler water species typically found in the lake. And it's worth noting that no common carp were detected inside the cove. This is just a short video of the fish in the West Cove and some habitat features. The fish in this video are pumpkin seed, bluegill, and largemouth bass, all of which are warm water fish that found refuge in the cove. I took this video actually in 2021, not long after it was completed, so it's safe to say the fish found the area very quickly and were also pretty curious about the GoPro. And then this video is just actually from this past spring in the same location. This is an adult largemouth bass. Based on the time of year, the size of the bass, and the habitat here, it's pretty likely that this bass came in here to spawn. And so moving over to the North Cove, since its construction, again, this is the one that remains open to the Keating Channel, we've seen a significant increase in fish diversity. Before construction, 79 samples were collected within the Keating Channel and Esrock Key between 2008 and 2017, documenting a total of 17 species. During construction in 2018 and 2019, as well as post-construction between 2020 to now, we have found 32 species utilizing the cove in the Keating Channel, 20 of which were not previously found during our 10 years of pre-construction sampling in this area. Some of the species that we are seeing now that we didn't see before are American eel, currently a provincially endangered species, banded killifish, bluegill, freshwater drum, largemouth bass, rock bass, walleye, yellow perch, among many others. And so while all of these species were known to be present elsewhere in the harbor, specifically over at Toronto Islands or Tommy Thompson Park, they had not been documented in the Keating Channel in those 10 years before the new habitat was built. And although a little further upstream of the cove, our crews caught an emerald bowfin north of Lakeshore within the lower Don earlier this year. This is actually our very first record of bowfin upstream of Lakeshore within the Don watershed. You can see how excited they are in the photo. And then finally, the connecting shoreline, which links the two coves. This area was enhanced with rock to improve habitat complexity and connectivity. Over the past 5.5 years since construction, we've documented 23 fish utilizing this restored area. And just this year, an Atlantic salmon was captured here. The only other record TRCA has of them in the mouth of the Don was one in 2012. And so catching an Atlantic salmon here was a very exciting find for our team. Although once abundant in Lake Ontario, Atlantic salmon were wiped out by the late 1800s due to overfishing and habitat loss. Ongoing restoration programs are working to bring them back, and their presence here is a great sign that this new habitat should support the species. And so we've already seen some really exciting results from that sub-project, but now I'm going to shift over to the New River Valley, the part of the project that was actually part of the original environmental assessment. And so the official start of the post-performance monitoring under the environmental assessment starts this year. The monitoring program for the EA is designed to measure whether the project is meeting its intended ecological outcome and ensure that restoration is functioning as planned. Before the formal performance monitoring period did begin this year, our team was able to get into portions of the New River Valley in 2024 and do some early monitoring. So I'll be sharing some finds from last year as well as the first half of this year. And so in 2024, while construction was still underway at both ends of the river valley, we couldn't actually access the new river valley itself yet. And instead, our team focused on monitoring the slip that now serves as the new river mouth. We found that fish were already showing interest in the area despite the ongoing construction. For example, although we electrofished this slip 45 times since 2015, it wasn't actually until last year that we captured northern pike, quillback, and pumpkin seed here for the very first time. And then building on that same location at the mouth of the New River, TRCA, in partnership with Fisheries and Oceans Canada and Carleton University, have been conducting an acoustic telemetry study to track fish movement and monitor their response to habitat creation along the Toronto Harbour. We currently have 49 acoustic receivers on the Toronto waterfront tracking tagged fish. Species tagged as part of our study include common carp, largemouth bass, northern pike, and white sucker. The acoustic receivers detect unique signals from the tagged fish that are within 800 meters of it, and then receivers can also detect tagged fish from other studies connected elsewhere in Lake Ontario if they come in within range of our equipment. And so as part of this work, we deployed a buoy at the New River mouth that continuously tracked tagged fish, and right away we saw fish in the area. Northern pike, common carp, white sucker, largemouth bass, and even lake trout were all detected using the area. Largemouth bass, common carp, and lake trout had never been recorded in this slip by TRCA before last year. We tagged 60 new fish for this study last year, bringing the total number of individuals tracked in the Toronto Harbour to 110 at the end of 2024. And because this project is part of the larger network across Lake Ontario, we're also detecting fish tagged outside of our study, which was at lake trout, for example. With access to the new river valley in 2025, we moved the buoy further upstream into the river, but I'll get to that a little bit later. And while this equipment does give us 24/7 insights into fish presence and movements, it only works for tagged fish, which is why we continue to complete our active monitoring techniques like electrofishing and netting as well. And although the river was not fully connected when we made these discoveries last year, Canoe Cove, a coastal wetland created at the entrance of the new river, was and likely contributed to us finding these fish utilizing the area so soon. And again, even though last year our crews couldn't make it past the construction into the main river valley, this photo shows a bowfin that successfully made it past the construction crews and actually used the new habitat to spawn. And so it might be hard to see, but the photo shows a male bowfin guarding. There's a few eggs, but thousands of fry. So little baby bowfin. And so our teams were able to access and monitor the newly created wetlands in both 2024 and 2025, installing acoustic receivers to track fish movement and setting up temperature and dissolved oxygen loggers for passive monitoring. Unlike the real-time system in the river mouth, this equipment stores data for download once a year. This year, we also started conducting turbidity monitoring during different precipitation events to compare how the wetlands respond compared to the main river valley. Like I mentioned before, the backwater lagoons, for example, are less likely to receive the same sediment loads from traveling downstream that make the river turbid, meaning they should remain much clearer. Low turbidity is important because clear water allows more sunlight to reach aquatic plants, supports higher oxygen levels, and makes it easier for fish to feed. This monitoring basically tells us whether the habitats are providing suitable conditions for fish. And this is just some of last year's results for one of the wetlands. The data on the top shows dissolved oxygen levels compared to the provincial water quality objectives for both warm and cold water species. You'll notice that DO levels do exceed the upper threshold for cold water species a few times throughout the monitoring season. One of those times was in October. Knowing though that this habitat is still under construction, we'd asked Waterfront Toronto if anything maybe happened in the wetland, and they did let us know that they had been dewatering it to do some more submergent plantings. So during that time, the logger was exposed to air, so the data for that period is inaccurate, for example. But even aside from that time in October, there are some occasional spikes in DO, dissolved oxygen, sorry, which is normal in a new wetland. Newly established vegetation and algae can produce oxygen during the day, so temporarily high readings are expected as the ecosystem matures. By tracking dissolved oxygen over time, we can make sure the wetland is providing a safe and healthy home for fish as oxygen levels impact fish survival. And then the graph on the bottom shows water temperature in the same wetland broken down by preferred ranges for warm, cool, and cold water fish. As expected, temperature generally followed a consistent seasonal pattern, rising through the spring, stabilizing in the summer, and then dropping in the fall, closely mirroring air temperature trends. This wetland's temperature mostly stayed within the cool to warm water range until mid-October when temperatures began to drop. This shows that the wetland is providing a thermal environment suitable for a variety of fish species throughout the year. We also conducted more active monitoring in the wetlands. Both last year and this year, we've set minnow traps in each of the new wetlands and captured a variety of species, including banded killifish, brook stickleback, brown bullhead, fathead minnow, pumpkin seed, round goby, and three-spined stickleback. Given that the vegetation is still establishing in these wetlands, we are intentionally avoiding using larger nets or deploying our smaller electrofishing boat, which could potentially disturb the new plantings and impact the habitat restoration process. Each wetland within the river valley, like the West Cove, is equipped with carp exclusion gates to prevent adult common carp from entering while still allowing native fish species to pass through. Our monitoring has confirmed the effectiveness of these barriers as no common carp have been detected within any of the wetlands. And just so if no one recognizes a fish on this slide, it is of a pumpkin seed. And so while crews are in the area doing other monitoring, they often deploy underwater cameras to capture video footage. The fish seen in this video are banded killifish in Canoe Cove. And so as part of our monitoring, we're also conducting aquatic vegetation surveys. On this slide, you can see an example of surveys that we completed in Wetland 1 in both 2024 and 2025. These surveys let us monitor how vegetation is establishing, and we'll continue doing them annually in all of the wetlands and the New River over the next few years. And you can see on the maps there already in just 1 year, there's a notable increase in vegetation growth. Species like coontail and Canada waterweed are establishing in the wetlands, which is a great sign as vegetation provides good quality fish habitat. We have noted algae in these surveys, which I'm sure many of you have probably already noticed if you've been over to the park. It's actually completely normal in new wetlands. In the early years, algae often flourishes because nutrients are abundant, but as submergent vegetation continues to establish, it begins to balance the system, and then algae levels typically decline. And this spring was really exciting for us. We were able to get into the New River, and our crews were able to access it with our electrofishing boat. In just our very first electrofishing sample alone this spring, we captured 9 species. We found northern pike, walleye, pumpkin seed, white sucker, brown bullhead, largemouth bass, black crappie, rock bass, and yellow perch, all native species within the river. And we're going to continue monitoring the New River in the spring, summer, and fall each year as part of the post-performance monitoring program for this project, but even after that as our part of our long-term monitoring program. Um, and again, for ID purposes, on the top right, you'll see a northern pike and more northern pike being held in the bottom middle photo. There's 3 of them, and the top middle photo is of a walleye, which we don't often see along the Toronto waterfront, so it's always an exciting find. And so in 2025, we made a few updates to our telemetry study. We moved the real-time buoy further upstream in the New River to better capture fish movements throughout the system. We also deployed 3 additional acoustic receivers along the river to improve our ability to accurately track the tagged fish and understand how they're using the new habitat. This year, we tagged 27 more fish, bringing the total number of fish tracked in the Toronto Harbor to 149. Species tagged this year included northern pike, white sucker, largemouth bass, and walleye. Some observations this year, just only from the real-time buoy, include 9 unique fish detections within the river, 2 of which were white suckers and 2 were northern pike that we tagged. The other 5 fish are still unknown at this time, unfortunately. They were fish tagged as part of another study within Lake Ontario, and the fish traveled here, and so the researcher hasn't uploaded the data into the binational database yet. So hopefully we'll know soon once they do that which species that we didn't tag have already found the new Don River mouth. And so locally, we've already seen clear signs that the project has had a positive impact on the Don River. But what does it mean for the Toronto waterfront as a whole? Many of you may know that Toronto was listed as an area of concern in 1987, meaning that local environmental degradation was considered severe enough to potentially impact the wider Great Lakes system. Since then, progress has been made, but it has not yet been delisted. And the project directly aids 2 of the key issues contributing to this area of concern designation. The first being the loss of fish and wildlife habitat, and the second being degraded fish and wildlife populations. So, by reestablishing a range of natural habitat features that support native species in the area, the project contributes to restoring the impairment associated with habitat loss and, in turn, is expected to have a positive impact on fish populations. To confirm this, though, ongoing monitoring is needed to track how fish communities respond and continue to respond to these restored habitats over time to help evaluate the long term ecological benefits. And so many restoration monitoring activities, including this project, are specifically designed to improve ecological conditions, aiding in the goal of delisting Toronto as an area of concern. But for more information on that, I suggest checking out the Toronto Intermedial Action Plan website for more information. And so what are our next steps for the project? TRC's aquatic monitoring team, basically we're going to keep monitoring. Our staff will continue collecting data this year, and then over the winter, we'll take a comprehensive look at the results. The monitoring results are going to help measure the project's habitat restoration success and inform future restoration efforts as well, and then ideally bringing Toronto closer to delisting as an area of concern. And that's it for my formal presentation. So Philip, I guess I'll hand it over to you for a question period.
Uh, Bryn, thanks very much. That's a very exciting presentation and just offers so much hope that
Hmm.
our waterfront is going to look very differently than it did 10